What if understanding people too deeply could make you dangerous? Not because you want to hurt them, but because you can see what they fear, what they crave, and what they'll do next. Most of us use empathy to connect. Hannibal Lecter uses it to control. To him, emotions aren't something to feel. They're patterns to study. He listens, observes, mirrors, and waits, until you forget that you're standing in front of a predator wearing a man's face. But the real question isn't about him, it's about us. Because when we look into Hannibal's mind, we're not just studying a monster. We're confronting the parts of ourselves that crave control, power, and understanding. This is the psychology of Hannibal Lecter, and what his brilliance reveals about the darkness of the human mind. Hannibal Lecter isn't just one of fiction's most intelligent minds, he's one of its most terrifyingly calm. Created by author Thomas Harris, Hannibal first appeared in Red Dragon and later came to life through the TV series Hannibal, portrayed by Mads Mikkelsen with unsettling elegance. In this version, he isn't a monster hiding in the shadows. He's a refined psychiatrist, a man of taste and culture, walking freely among those who trust him the most. His patience. Every movement, every word feels deliberate. He observes human behavior not to understand it, but to master it. And that mastery comes from something deeper than intelligence, a mind shaped by trauma, isolation, and control. Hannibal grew up surrounded by violence. He learned early that empathy is dangerous, that to survive, one must observe emotion, not feel it. Over time, that survival instinct evolved into something else: fascination. A curiosity so deep it blurred the line between studying humanity and consuming it. But what makes his mind worth studying isn't the horror, it's the precision. Because behind every calm smile lies a lesson about how the human mind defends, manipulates, and adapts. Understanding Hannibal isn't about excusing him. It's about recognizing how a brilliant mind can turn self-awareness into a weapon. And to truly grasp that, we have to look at how his mind works, piece by piece, through the lens of real psychology. To understand Hannibal, we have to start with one thing: control. Not control over others, but control over himself. In Season 1, Episode 2, Amuse-Bouche, Hannibal prepares a dinner made from human flesh while calmly discussing art and philosophy with Jack Crawford. There's no hesitation in his voice, no moral tension in his eyes. Every gesture is deliberate. What we're seeing isn't numbness, it's controlled detachment, a psychological mechanism where an individual intentionally separates emotion from reasoning to preserve mental stability. This concept draws from emotional regulation theory developed by psychologists James Gross and Oliver John in 2003. Their research explains how people can consciously modulate their emotions, deciding when and how they experience or express them. But Gross and John also warned about the cost of excessive suppression. When emotions are consistently restrained, they don't disappear. They build tension beneath awareness. Over time, this can lead to emotional coldness, reduced empathy, and even moral disengagement. In therapy, controlled detachment can be healthy. Surgeons, firefighters, even therapists themselves use it to make clear decisions in moments of stress. It's the ability to step back from emotion just enough to stay functional. But in Hannibal's case, the boundary's gone. His detachment isn't a temporary strategy. It's a state of being. He doesn't suppress emotion to find peace. He removes emotion from the equation entirely. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Because a person who can choose not to feel still understands what others feel, and that turns control into power. Hannibal's calm isn't serenity, it's calculation, a kind of psychological stillness that allows him to act without guilt, fear, or hesitation. And once control becomes effortless, empathy becomes the next weapon. But control alone isn't power, not unless you can read the emotions you've chosen to suppress. Hannibal doesn't just stay detached. He sees through people. Once emotion is under control, the next frontier is understanding it, not through feeling, but through observation. Hannibal Lecter doesn't feel what others feel. He maps it. In Season 2, Episode 8, Suzakana, Hannibal listens to Will Graham's voice crack ever so slightly while describing a murder. He tilts his head, watching, decoding every word, every silence. He knows the emotion, but he doesn't share it. This is cognitive empathy, the ability to recognize and understand another person's emotional state without internalizing it. The concept traces back to psychologists David Premack and Guy Woodruff, who first proposed the idea of theory of mind. The human capacity to attribute mental states, beliefs, desires, intentions to others. In other words, it's what allows us to predict behavior by simulating someone else's mind. For most people, cognitive empathy is how we connect. It helps teachers guide students, negotiators build trust, and therapists understand pain without drowning in it. But Hannibal turns this tool into a weapon. When Will struggles with guilt or self-doubt, Hannibal doesn't comfort him. He studies the mechanics of his emotion. He sees the cracks forming, the points of vulnerability, the thoughts that could be redirected. By mastering empathy without compassion, Hannibal achieves perfect psychological vision. He understands people without ever being burdened by their pain. This is where control becomes influence. Because when you know why someone feels, you can decide when they break. In psychology, this detachment from emotional resonance is sometimes observed in individuals with high psychopathic traits. They possess strong cognitive empathy, but lack emotional empathy, allowing them to manipulate rather than connect. Hannibal embodies this paradox completely. He can describe your suffering better than you can, but he'll never share it. And that's why his empathy feels less like understanding and more like surveillance. But Hannibal doesn't stop at understanding. He uses what he learns to reshape others, gently, patiently, as if he were sculpting the human mind itself. After mastering empathy, Hannibal moves into his most dangerous art, not just understanding the mind, but reshaping it. In Season 2, Episode 11, Kono Mano, Hannibal sits across from Will Graham, voice calm, tone therapeutic. He tells Will,
"Your design is evolving. Your choices affect the physical structures of your brain."
Killing is changing the way I think.
Yes.
but every word is a seed designed not to heal but to grow in the direction he chooses. This is manipulative therapy, a distortion of genuine psychoanalytic technique, where the therapist uses insight not for healing, but for control. The concept finds its roots in the work of Sigmund Freud, particularly in his ideas about transference, when a patient unconsciously redirects emotions from one person to another, often toward the therapist. In healthy therapy, transference is explored and resolved, but in Hannibal's world it's cultivated. He makes himself the gravitational center of Will's psyche, someone who understands him more deeply than anyone else, until Will's perception of morality begins to bend around Hannibal's influence. Psychologists like Carl Jung and Otto Kernberg later emphasized how dangerous this imbalance can be. When the therapist becomes the object of obsession or authority, therapy stops being a space for healing and turns into a psychological dependency. Hannibal manipulates that dependency masterfully. He positions himself as the mirror Will needs, the only one who can reflect his true nature, while subtly rewriting what that nature means. Through gentle affirmation, subtle doubt, and philosophical nudges, Hannibal makes Will believe that killing could be an expression of truth rather than a crime of passion. This isn't ordinary manipulation, it's a therapeutic seduction, the kind that doesn't force the victim, but convinces them to walk willingly. Modern psychology might compare this to gaslighting, a term first popularized by Martha Stout and Robin Stern. describing emotional manipulation that makes someone question their own reality. But Hannibal doesn't just make Will question reality, he makes him rebuild it from scratch in Hannibal's image. In the end, the therapy room becomes a stage. The patient becomes the subject and the therapist becomes God. But even Hannibal can't fully escape his own methods, because the deeper he manipulates others, the more he begins to project his own reflection onto them. The deeper you look into Hannibal Lecter's mind, the more you realize he isn't just manipulating others. He's also at war with his own reflection. In Season 2, Episode 13, Mizumono, Hannibal meets Will again after their violent separation. Will tells him,
You were supposed to leave.
and Hannibal answers with quiet sincerity,
We couldn't leave without you.
Beneath that line lies the purest form of transference, a concept introduced by Sigmund Freud in the early 20th century, describing the unconscious redirection of feelings from one person to another. For Freud, transference was a natural part of therapy. Patients would project their unresolved emotions, love, anger, dependency, onto the therapist. But Hannibal reverses this dynamic. He, the therapist, becomes the one who transfers. His fascination with Will Graham is not just intellectual, it's emotional, spiritual, and disturbingly intimate. Hannibal projects his own suppressed desires for connection, for recognition, and even for redemption onto Will. This is projection, another Freudian concept, where an individual denies their own traits or emotions and attributes them to someone else. When Hannibal tells Will, "You delight in wickedness as much as I do," it isn't purely manipulation, it's confession disguised as observation. What he sees in Will isn't Will's darkness, it's his own. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung would call this the meeting of the shadow, the repressed part of ourselves that we refuse to face. Hannibal, in his own twisted way, doesn't hide from his shadow. He cultivates it and tries to awaken it in others. But in doing so, his identity begins to fracture. The line between where Hannibal ends and where Will begins becomes blurred. He is both the mirror and the reflection, both the analyst and the analyzed. And this is where his brilliance becomes his curse. The same psychological tools he uses to control others are the very tools that expose his own longing for understanding. In real-world psychology, transference and projection can happen subtly. In relationships, workplaces, even friendships. Whenever we see others not as they are, but as a reflection of our own needs. But Hannibal magnifies that process into art. He doesn't just see himself in others, he tries to complete himself through them. And yet beneath all that intimacy, there's a strange kind of calm, a philosophy that allows him to observe suffering without ever truly feeling it. At the heart of Hannibal Lecter's calm lies something even deeper than intelligence, a philosophy, a way of seeing the world not through emotion, but through aesthetic distance. In Season 1, Episode 2, Amuse-Bouche, Hannibal replies,
Killing must feel good to God, too. He does it all the time. And are we not created in his image?
That line isn't just chilling, it's philosophical detachment, the ability to rationalize moral horror through intellectual abstraction. This mindset echoes the ideas of Stoicism, particularly from Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Hannibal takes that ancient detachment and twists it into something coldly divine. For him, emotion clouds clarity. Pain, fear, guilt. They are distractions from truth. So he reframes violence not as cruelty, but as art. Like a surgeon dissecting the human condition, Hannibal observes life and death with clinical serenity. In modern psychology, this resembles emotional detachment, a coping mechanism where a person distances themselves from emotional pain. Used healthily, it can protect people from trauma or burnout, as seen in therapists, doctors, or soldiers who must function under pressure. But when pushed to Hannibal's level, detachment becomes dehumanization. The world becomes a collection of moments to be observed, not lives to be understood. People become instruments of experience, and morality dissolves into aesthetics. Hannibal's dinner table, filled with exquisite cuisine made from his victims, is the perfect metaphor for this worldview. It's beauty built on horror, art built on annihilation, and it reflects the final evolution of his psychology. A man who no longer sees himself as human, but as a curator of human experience. But even for someone as detached as Hannibal, there's one truth he can't escape. You cannot fully understand humanity without first being human. When you strip away the elegance, the intellect, and the charm, what remains of Hannibal Lecter isn't just a monster, it's a mirror, a reflection of what happens when reason outgrows empathy and intelligence loses its moral anchor. Each technique he uses, detachment, empathy, manipulation, projection, philosophy, begins as a legitimate psychological tool. But in Hannibal's hands, they become instruments of domination rather than understanding. Controlled detachment helps him regulate emotion until it kills his compassion. Cognitive empathy allows him to read others, but never to feel for them. Manipulative therapy turns insight into power. Projection and transference make his relationships mirror his own void. And philosophical detachment elevates him to a place beyond guilt, but also beyond humanity. And maybe that's the lesson hidden beneath all his sophistication. Even the most powerful psychological techniques mean nothing if they're not grounded in empathy. Because without empathy, knowledge becomes manipulation, and self-mastery becomes self-destruction. Hannibal Lecter shows us what the human mind is capable of when brilliance is left without balance. So the question is, how much of Hannibal's mind lives inside all of us? In moments when we detach to protect ourselves, when we analyze instead of feel, or when we use understanding to influence rather than connect, are we still in control of our psychology, or has our psychology begun to control us?